Hello. Thank you all for coming. I greatly appreciate it. This is cool. It's a full house, except like the spots right in the front. We'll see if anyone's not nervous and comes. My name's Andrew Miller. I'm with Rubric Technical Marketing right now, but was on the customer side for about 7 years, and then kind of admin to architect before that for customer side, kind of admin to engineer to architect, partner side, pre-sales. That was about 8 years, SE to manager, director, but not doing other stuff. Have you ever heard that IT is constantly changing and that we always need to be learning? I mean, has anyone here not heard that somehow? Maybe you've been under a rock. I mean, that's like the obvious part. That's the easy part. The hard part is, what do you actually do about it, right? So when I usually do this presentation, I actually literally bring with me one of these, but bring it in my carry-on luggage, and Amazon shipping didn't work kind of thing, security, all that. So I'll actually bring this, and the reason is, I actually go around the audience and with a couple nails and a piece of wood and ask, you or you to like take a nail and a hammer and pound it in. And of course that works fine. After that, you take a couple screws and say, hey, say I ask you and say, hey, can you take this screw and pound it into the wood? And you're probably like, well, no, that's not going to work. But I mean, the better answer, and someone else gets, is like, it'll work as long as you just hit it hard enough, that kind of thing, right? So the reason that I use this is because when you open it up inside, it's actually this really cool multi-tool. I mean, it's got a flat head and a Phillips head and that kind of thing. And whoever's been the most engaged gets it for free. If you really want one, it's $10 on Amazon, 10 US, right, kind of thing. So whatever that is roughly in euros. And to be super clear about this, when I first came up with the title of this presentation, one of my coworkers, I don't see her here right now, are there any MC Hammer legacy fans here? Because she was asking me, does the golden hammer mean this? I was like, no, I don't think anyone who sees me present wants to see this in that. So to be clear, we're not talking about that, we're talking about this guy. Does anyone know who that is? This is actually Abraham Maslow, European philosopher, right? He is most famous for this, the hierarchy of needs, based on, that we start off with physical and safety and eventually get to love, esteem. But of course, the more modern IT version of it that I think we all resonates for all of us, right, is this, whether you're in IT or not. And that's a throwaway joke, but you got to have them in there. Because what we're really talking about is this. He came up with the most popular formulation of the idea called the golden hammer. If all that you have is a hammer, every problem seems to look like a nail. So, have you ever met or been maybe a CIO for whom the answer to everything is cloud? Or maybe a sysadmin? I mean, I was here where the answer for everything is, I'm going to write a script for that. I mean, I've done like 300-line bash scripts for inside and external ISC, bind DNS, that kind of thing. Or maybe an IT director where it's, well, let's check with a vendor. Let's talk to the solution provider about that, So what we're talking about here are actually mental models. And the problem is when you have one or two or three, but you don't have multiple ways of looking at the world. So what are mental models? They're a thought process in how we understand the world, even precisely, how do we think? How do we understand knowledge? How do we anticipate and predict what's coming? Does anyone know who Warren Buffett is? This is Europe, but I'm assuming he's like unimaginably rich, okay? He's got a counterpart named Charlie Munger, who's just insanely rich, okay? And Charlie's on the record as saying, it's undeniably true, human brain must work in models, you need to have better ones that can make your brain more efficient than everybody else. Now, wait just a minute, what did I just do? I just made an appeal to authority. And of course, I mean, for a lot of us, it's like, appeal to authority, that's not cool. But well, think about this, is that good or is that bad? The key is actually recognizing what just happened, because we all rely on this. I mean, how often do we go to the doctor if we haven't already diagnosed ourselves via Google and that we're going to die in 2 days kind of thing, right? But think about the appeal to authority. The doctor gives you a prescription, you go to get medicine at the pharmacy, etc. But that exact same authority, there was a very different appeal to that same authority, say 40, 50 years ago, right? Does this authority give that same kind of appeal today? And I know I'm in Europe, right, kind of thing. So it's actually the same thing. So how we think determines how we act, and we all have mental models. The key is knowing what they are and understanding them. And of course, because there's no mental model that is perfect, right? They're imperfect, but they're useful. And if we don't diversify them, we end up torturing the facts to try and shove them into the ways that we look at the world. So for the rest of this, we're just going to look at a couple mental models. We're going to tell a couple IT stories that relate to them. Then we're going to talk about how you can use this more if you're actually interested in this idea. 2 razors. Who here has heard of Occam's razor? Quite a few, right? Who's heard of Hanlon's razor? Not as common. Okay, Occam's razor, that's basically KISS, right? Keep it simple, whatever. That if you're competing hypotheses, I don't even like to do the scientific definition, right, kind of thing. There's competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. I was the guy in IT who wanted to read the manual for every single thing, like out of college, and tweak every single option and make it just right for my environment. How well does that work when you go to upgrade something? And there are like scripts that rely on a certain number of defaults, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's value in simplicity, and even about complexity being the enemy of reliability. Hanlon's razor concept that never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity, or don't assume someone's out to get you. They might just be kind of clueless. That's possible. I actually worked with a gentleman early on where he came from this incredibly political environment. And when he first came on, I was like, is he trying to sabotage my projects, or does he not really like me? What I realized eventually was he just didn't know how to work in a non-political environment where we actually all kind of liked each other, to be honest. Like, we enjoyed coming to work every day and seeing the folks we worked with. So in some ways, by recognizing that eventually, it took a while to be honest, we're actually able to work pretty well together instead of me actually making an unintentional enemy out of him, right? Because I could have made that a self-fulfilling prophecy. Accurate NSX, children of the 80s, right? I mean, this was the ultimate, like, you want this when you don't know that you need a practical four-door sedan when you grow up kind of thing because you have kids, right? But in the 80s, Japan was going to take over the world, right? So there were Detroit executives that thought, maybe it's something beyond, limited markets, and, confining imports and inexpensive labor. So they actually were able to tour a factory in Japan. And what they saw there was no inventory. So their mental model was, real factories have inventory. This must be staged. It must be a Potemkin village, if you will. What they didn't realize was they were seeing the beginning of just-in-time manufacturing, right? So their mental model forced a totally incorrect conclusion. And this is where we get to the point of like not even being aware of what your mental model is and how you can change how you see reality. Or let's even call it from a military perspective, the lack of situational awareness, right? Zero-sum games, there's only so much. As humans, if it's a zero-sum game, the pie's only so big, we've got to scrap for our own piece of the pie. It brings out sometimes the worst in us, right? So if you can see that, let's take it from a career perspective. I joined a company that grew 5x in 5 years, a company with a smaller partner named Vero in the Carolinas in the US. There were a lot of opportunities that went by that I wasn't able to take advantage of. But I was able to be relatively low-key about that because I knew there were going to be more opportunities coming. Same way actually at Rubrik where I am now. We've grown 3x in the last 10 months, right? I enjoy what I'm doing. I know there's going to be opportunities to come along. Or even as a pre-sales SE. Sometimes I've had customers where they have a certain budget and the budget doesn't fit their needs. And not to be manipulative, but you can actually go and look at a product and say, this is the primary purpose of it, but maybe there are some ancillary capabilities that allow me to find, other buckets of money, other budget categories that we can pull in, not stuff you'd primarily buy the product for, that can actually help you expand the pie in various ways. Blue water versus, or blue ocean versus red ocean. There's a whole book on this, right? This is about category creation. Red ocean is that, there's blood in the water, there's sharks, everyone's fighting kind of thing. Blue ocean is that you're actually competing on a totally different plane. And who did this well? I still play this at home with my twin 7-year-old boys, right? Because Nintendo decided to compete on totally different areas. They competed on motion control, ease of use, casual gaming. Nobody else was doing that at the time, right? Systems theory, unintended consequences, right? You've got complex systems, you make changes, you think you know what's going to happen. The best example I remember of this was I was actually at a NetApp partner for a while, and this isn't a bad NetApp thing, but I started to get a lot more complaints as a partner SE about support. And frankly, as a partner SE, you can't do too much about that, to be honest. I mean, the support comes from the manufacturer. What I found out through some back channel stuff was that they'd implemented a new way to measure their support folks. And the way they did it was incentivizing based on how many tickets you escalated. So think about this. You're a support manager. You want to, say, get the level 1 and level 2 support folks to take ownership and dig in and learn stuff. Well, what ended up happening was one of my customers on the phone literally was told, I will not escalate your support ticket after a week of it not going anywhere. That's infuriating, right? But think about it if you're that level 1 support tech. Maybe the next ticket you escalated, you lost your bonus or you got fired. What do you have to lose at that point, right? The last one here, before we kind of change gears, is recency theory versus availability bias. This is the idea that even maybe the most recent thing that you hear, you're the most excited about it. I worked with a professor on a learning management committee who was always excited about Moodle or Blackboard, the most recent one we heard about. Or there can be anchoring effect. Maybe as you work with a sales rep who always wants to go first in the presentations. They're betting that you'll evaluate everything in light of what you heard at the beginning. You'll evaluate things in light of that. We went to the moon, right? As humans. I mean, with less computing power than I've got in this, arguably, right? So that led to the idea that NASA is flawless. I'm not trying to be US-centric here, but I mean, as humans went to the moon. Until NASA wasn't flawless, right? This is the Challenger where it exploded. And there was a speech where Ronald Reagan ended up saying that the astronauts slipped the surly bonds of Earth to touch the face of God. How much better would it have been if he never had to give that speech, right? So we all want to be special. We all can be in various ways because we all are the product of unique experience that we have only had, and then combining those, and the creativity is mixing and matching the patterns of what you've seen to then match that to other things. So how can we actually do this? Two ways. Skills of reflection. That's being able to slow down enough to actually look inside and think about how you look at the world, what your mental models are, be aware of them enough to not just be going through the world reactively, but understand how you're thinking. This is even Socrates, know thyself, or Plato, or even the Apostle Paul, to have an answer for everything that lies within you, right? That idea. Skills of inquiry is the idea that you can reverse that and then look at the world around you, especially with complex or conflicting issues, to see the difference between people, what people say and what they do. My company was acquired about 150 people by a much larger company, about 2,000 folks. And at the time I was responsible for an SE team. So I was trying to look and understand what were the processes internally and what did people really do, and not gripe about that, right? But try and help enable the folks that I was responsible for be successful, not just based on what people say to do, but what people are really doing that are successful. Practically, even more, oh, my timer. Practically even more, there's a great post by the author of DuckDuckGo. You can find it just with that Google. He lists out 200 plus mental models. So what if you took one of those every week, Googled into it, explored it, spent an hour, say, looking at it? At the end of a year, you could have 52 mental models. This is everything from biology to science to mathematics to psychology. It's all over the place, right? And this is like just interesting stuff to poke at. You could have so many more ways to look at and understand the world. I always wonder why birds choose to stay in the same place when they can fly anywhere on the earth. Then I ask myself the same question. As humans, we have the unique ability and opportunity to change how we look at the world, to change how we process information. Why not take that opportunity? Thank you.